This podcast is brought to you by Hoare Chartered Accountants. Hoare Chartered Accountants are based in Galway City and are a leading provider of audit, accountancy and taxation services. For more information, visit hoarecharteredaccountants.ie. Now you're welcome along to the Maroon and White pod. So it was a victory for Galway at the weekend over Wexford, which puts them back into the hunt now for a place in this year's Leinster final. Antrim to come this Saturday at 2:30 in Beer Stadium. It's obviously part of a double header with the Galway footballers playing Dublin as well. I'm joined by former Wexford hurler Rory Jacob to look back on the game. First of all, Rory, deserved victory for Galway on Saturday?
You'd have to say so, Paul. I think to be fair, Galway came out of the traps well at the weekend. They probably in lots of ways probably dominated the first half. You know, they got a good platform in that first half. Wexford were slow to the blocks, made a lot of mistakes, I thought, and Galway were sharp and took their scores well and took their chances well. And you know, at half time they were in a good position. And you know, to be fair to Wexford, they came back well in the second half and kind of made a good game of it. But I think Galway had a little bit more craft on the day and probably used the ball a little bit better. And you know, their bigger players probably were up to scratch a little bit better than maybe our players, and that was probably the difference in the end. So I think it was a deserved win for Galway. You know, the score at the end of it, what was it, 7 or 8 points in the end, or maybe a little bit more. You know, it was probably reflective of the Galway performance at the weekend, I think.
Did you see anything different from Galway at the weekend? I suppose the most impressive aspect was probably really in that first half when they went against the breeze, and the work rate from the Galway forwards was really impressive, even if you compare it to where they were in the first game against Kilkenny.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah, I would say, Paul. To be fair, you probably hit the nail on the head for me. The Galway forwards, I thought were very impressive from the point of view of turning Wexford over and putting them under huge pressure. Now, we tended to go for a good few kind of short puck outs and things like that. And Galway were well set up and very very hungry for work. You know, it wasn't just one fella going into tackle. It was, you know, when one fella got to tackle and a second fella was in or a third fella was in, and they were turning them over. And that was a huge aspect of their play. And you know, that gives any team a great platform. Hurling is, you know, there's a lot of tactics in the game there nowadays and things like that, but it still comes down to the very, very basics of, you know, working hard, turning over the opposition, you know, getting in tackles. And the Galway forwards, especially, I thought the other day were excellent at that. And then I suppose on top of that, I thought their backs in the first half, especially, were quite dominant. You know, I thought Darren Morrissey was very, very impressive cornerback. You know, he snuffed out Rory O'Connor the first half. Really, he didn't give him much ball. And then the half back line, you know, Keenan Fahy, Gavin Lee, TJ Brennan, the three of them again, I thought were impressive. And that's something like I haven't seen all of Galway's games this year or anything, and you'll be more aware of it. But you know, I think they have a good platform there of kind of newer athletic players in the half back line that'll be a big advantage for Galway. You know, in the next 4 or 5 years, I think the three of them are impressive operators, very athletic, good hurlers, and there's a nice balance to it as well with the kit hog there at TJ Brennan and the other two, Keenan Fahy and Gavin Lee, good at going forward, but also can defend and get under the high ball. So, you know, I was impressed with Galway from that sense. You know, how hard they were tested, I don't know. They got a test for certain periods from Wexford. You know, the jury is still out on Galway a little bit from the real higher level stuff, but at the same time, they'll be happy with the result of the weekend. I'm sure Micheál Donoghue and his backroom team will be delighted, and they're kind of back on track after a poor start against Kilkenny, but they're in contention now for a Leinster final place if they can look after the Antrim game, and then it goes into really a semi final against Dublin in the last game. You know.
It's all right for back six that have absolutely no pace, which was described by a former Wexford hurler in the build-up to this game.
Right, I didn't hear that. I don't know who said that,
Yeah, it was
Paul.
on
But
Richie Kyo in the Wexford Hurling podcast during the week.
okay, Richie. All right, so
Yeah.
Richie let it all. Richie let it all out on that one. But no, I think I haven't seen, as I said to you, I haven't seen a huge amount of Galway this year, really, in live games or anything. I saw him down in Wexford Park in the league game. All
Hmm.
right, I was at that, and I've seen him maybe little snippets on the TV, but I haven't seen him live a whole lot. But to me, I think that half back line, there's potential there. I think there's, as I said, Gavin Lee has seemed to settle in well to number six. Six is a pivotal position for any team, and like I don't see a huge amount of lack of pace in that team. To be honest with you, I think Darren Morrissey is sharp. He wouldn't be easy to play on. I think he's sharp and hard to play on. You'd probably maybe Fintan Burke doesn't have a huge amount of pace, but everybody is not going to be lightning quick. Fintan has other attributes. He's strong. He's good at reading the play, and then you've Pádraig Mannion, a cornerback. So I think there's a good platform there for Galway in the backs. To be honest with you, I don't see a huge kind of what Richie said, a lack of pace there. I think there's plenty of athleticism in him. I think there's good hurlers there, and I think there's a good platform, as I said, going forward for Galway with those six or seven fellas, and there's probably more to come in as well. I'm sure you'd know better than that, but there's probably more lads in Galway as well to come into that half back line and full back line as well.
Meola is a big decision to make now, Rory, if you're to look at it. Dahi Burke obviously missed the last day through suspension, but against Offaly looked really comfortable in a shirt at full back. Keenan Valley at
Mm.
five, I thought he
Yeah,
really gave Galway something different then as well. It's a big decision to make now. Like Dahi Burke's obviously going to come back in, but who is going to miss out here then?
yeah, sure. It's probably a big decision, all right. But I'd say to be fair, again, I don't know the thoughts of Mihal and them, but you know, uh, looking at the half back line, I don't think you'd be changing that the next day. You've as I said, you've athleticism, you've size, you've hurling ability in that half back line, and that's everything you'd be looking for. It's probably more in the full back line. It's probably that they'll be looking at, and it's probably really between Findenburg and Dyburg, I would say. And again, you'd know the scene up there. Finton has been a really, really rock solid full back from the club scene for many a year for St. Thomas's. You know he's he's played a good while with Inter-County as well, but maybe hasn't really established himself in lots of ways. And like he probably did okay the other day, as I said, without being really tested. But it'd be hard to leave off Dahi Burke at the same time. If he's probably the real leader in that back line, and and bringing him in there is probably a good problem to have at the same time. It's good to have options. I know down say down Wexford way, we'd love to have options like the two or three of them as options to come on. So I'm sure if Dahi doesn't start, he'll obviously play a big role coming in. But I would say they'll probably go back to Dahi myself, just knowing it coming down the straight. Like if you don't play Dahi Burke against Dublin, for example, in that game, and you're beaten, there's massive criticism coming your way. Then, like you don't really leave off a 4 or 5 time All Star, in a pivotal game like that. So I'm sure he'll be back in the centre of defence, and maybe it could be Finton misses out. It could be, but it's not probably anything to do with his performances at the weekend because he was quite solid. But again, as I said, I think that half back line, just looking at the three of them, I think I'd be going for them again the next day and trying to build a half back line. Galway over the years, going back to the 80s, I remember their great half back line of Tony Keady, Pete Finnerty, and Jerry McInerney. And if Galway are going to come strong and hurling again, you need to build a strong half back line. And I think there's potential there in that group of three fellas.
We're about 7 minutes into the podcast, and I'm kind of shocked at myself that I haven't mentioned his name yet. But Rory, as a forward, you have to appreciate, I'm sure, Cathal Mannion's performance on Saturday.
Yeah, but sure, it's outstanding, Paul. Really, but sure, anytime I see Carl Mannion, it's never any different. I think he's for I don't know how long he's playing now, but any day I ever see Carl Mannion playing, I think he's an absolutely outstanding player. I think there's no better striker in the game off left or right. There's no better mover in the game, really. I think you like if you were sitting down today to pick the top 10 players in the country, he'd most certainly be in that conversation anyway. That's the quality he has. Like he's just roving around the field. He's just so cool and calm on the ball. he has everything you'd want in a player. He's just fantastic. And again, like, you wouldn't be surprised with it at the weekend, because he's doing that for Galway for as long as I remember. Again, you would have seen him more, and the Galway listeners have seen him more than I do. But at the same time, anytime I see him playing, I think he's outstanding. I just think his balance, as I said, his striking off left and right is absolutely outstanding. He's such a good technique. Like, you very rarely see him miss hitting a strike, or if he gets a chance, he very rarely misses it. He just takes that. They say, great players, they always seem like they've time on the ball, and Cathal Mannion is always seems to have time. He's always out in space, and that doesn't happen by accident. It's not just everybody is leaving him on his own. It's his movement, his hunger for the ball, and his reading of the game is absolutely outstanding.
At one stage in the second half, he got a turnover on one of the Wexford substitutes. I can't think who it was now exactly, but at that stage, it just showed his attitude. Like, he was doing the dirty work as well as the scores, and just showing everything that's good about Colin Mannion at the weekend.
Yeah, well, sure. Isn't that nowadays what forwards have to do anyway? To be honest, Paul, it's really all, first and foremost. I'd say with most management teams now, they're judging fellas on, what are they doing when they don't have the ball, in lots of ways. And you'd be looking, as a management team, for your leaders to be, setting the tone with that, and that'd have to come from, the likes of Cathal Mannion, Conor Whelan, David Burke, all those fellas around that middle third area of the field. And I thought that was impressive from Galway at the weekend. Not just Cathal Mannion, really, but even Conor Whelan, who I'd have huge time for. I think he's absolutely outstanding. But he did a really, really good workman-like performance for Galway. Put in an awful lot of tackles, got an awful lot of turnovers, and them lads set the tone to say to the other players that it's not just about the fancy stuff. It's about doing the dirty work. And if you're not going to do that nowadays, you're going to be blown out of the water. And those fellas, as I said, set the tone for the younger lads around them, and they kind of followed suit then.
Yeah, even if you're looking at Colin Mannion's last two games, 225 combined totals, 17 obviously the last day, 2-7 against Offaly, and probably the thing people aren't realising too is the way he's stepped up to the free taking this year.
Yeah, sure. He's not a lad that's anybody ever thought was a free take. I'm sure he probably takes him for his club, but it's something this year that's it's a new string to his bow, and I'm sure Galway have probably been looking for that, maybe replacement for a free taker for since Joe Canning is gone. Really, I know Conor Cooney has been at him and things, but Cahill is probably the real mainstay of the Galway forwards at this stage, and for him to be able to take the frees as well, and as again, looks like a really outstanding free taker. His technique, doesn't seem to let him down ever, and he if you have a player who's able to score 11 points from frees, like, that's huge. I don't think he missed too many at the weekend. Did he miss any? I don't know, but if you're scoring 11, you're scoring 90 to 100% of your frees. That's a huge platform. So again, I think Cathal Mannion, at the moment he's really in kind of hurler of the year form. It's just for Galway, can they keep it going? And probably a thing that they'll have to look at is maybe their over dependence on him from a scoring perspective. If there's a day that the team kind of holds Cathal Mannion to maybe 2 or 3 points, are the other lads stepping up then to get the scores then? And I'm sure they probably will, but even at the weekend, probably their forwards didn't get enough on the scoreboard to from the perspective of a team that was dominating. Cahill got 17 to the scores, and a lot of the other fellas, tipped in with 1 or 2 points. But some of them, they'll be looking for more on the scoreboard. The likes of Conor Whelan, the likes of Tiernan and Killeen, even Colin Malloy there in the corner. They'll be looking for more scores from those fellas going forward to really take the pressure off Cahill from a scoring perspective.
How do you begin to get more out of the other forwards, Rory? Like, obviously it's easier said than done, but how can Galway get more scores across the board in their forward line?
Well, sure. I suppose that's kind of the $1 million question, but at the I suppose the first attribute that you need, and Galway had it at the weekend, is a willingness for work, and they kind of started that first part today, generally, or the other day. Generally, when you're working really, really hard and putting in tackles and turnovers, the ball generally comes towards you, and it's probably then off the ball. Then it's been really really hungry for the ball off the ball. Then when the backs have it, or even when the ball has gone to the inside line, really making hard runs into the inside line to kind of get that overlap ball in the inside. So it's just kind of translating the I suppose the it's translating the effort that you're putting into tackle into the same effort then when your team has the ball to get into positions and get off the shoulder and to probably just get that bit of coolness into your game then when you receive it and take your score when it's on. It's there's good forwards there in Galway Brian Concannon, really good player, 2 points at the weekend. Again, I'd say there's probably even more in him. Young Malloy, I was very impressed with him against Offaly. Probably didn't do as much the other day. Now he was well marshalled from a Wexford perspective, but I think he can score. Conor Whelan sure has been a really good scorer for Galway. I'd say he's just slowly but surely kind of finding his form again and finding his confidence again. And I think at the weekend, I think his performance at the weekend will give him a big boost, to be honest with you. I thought he was excellent the other day. To be honest, even though he's not maybe shooting the lights out, his level of as I said, tackling, his level of work was huge. And I think there's going to be a day come now, maybe in the next 2 or 3 games, that he's going to be the one on the score sheet. And I think it's watch out everybody else then, because I think he when he takes off, he'll bring even more players into the play. And if they have Whelan and Mannion operating at a high level, now it's going to open up space then for other fellas. So that's probably the real challenge. The other day it was probably just Mannion was doing the bulk of the scoring, so the other fellas maybe the space didn't open up for him. But if you have two or three forwards who are buzzing and two or three forwards on their game, now it's a much different story for the opposition.
Just if we're to look at that first half overall, Galway obviously win the toss and they opted to go against the breeze in the first half.
Hmm.
They went in ahead 15-11. In that first half, did you kind of think straight away that Galway were the better team here, or did you think Wexford could have been closer?
Yeah, I kind of did. To be honest with you, I thought Wexford were poor in the first half. Really, they'll be disappointed with how they operated in the first half. To be honest with you, Paul, I think they made an awful lot of unforced errors in the half. They were turned over on a lot of short puck outs. We were trying to work the ball through the lines, and we weren't sharp enough with it, and maybe not athletic and strong enough to get out past the Galway players. And I'm sure maybe Keaton and the management team would probably look back on that and say maybe we possibly could have went a bit more direct maybe in the first half with the wind, and really test out off our Galway from that perspective. But I thought Galway were quite comfortable in the first half, to be honest. Outside of Lee Chin getting a few points in play, they really had us under control. We only really scored got our freeze then on top of that. So they were impressive the first half, and I think Galway came to the party to play in the first half in a good way. They were tuned in. They were probably obviously disappointed with how they did against Kilkenny, and this Wexford game after last year was probably a game that was in their head as well. So they were obviously well tuned in and well ready for it. And I thought Galway were well in their comfort zone in the first half. To be honest, as I said, I think the halfbacks got up in the first half for maybe 3 or 4 points between him, Gavin Lee and Keenan Fatty. And then, you know, as I said to you, Mannion was buzzing around the place and floating around getting his scores, and Concannon got a few scores as well. So, you know, I suppose I'd go back on it. I thought the role of Darren Morrissey at cornerback for Galway was really pivotal in the first half. Yeah, Rory O'Connor is a really, really good forward, to be honest, and he's one of our talisman. And Morrissey really didn't give Rory a sniff at it in the first half. He was tigerish. He was on top of him. He was attacking the ball like any cornerback you want, and that had a huge role to play, because then really then Galway only had to worry about Chin in that from that perspective, and having to just hold up one man when Morrissey had Rory under pressure. That gave Galway a great platform to push forward.
It was only last week when I had Offaly under 20 manager Leo O'Connor on the podcast, and we were both saying before the game that this was season defining really for both teams, Galway and Wexford, going into the weekend.
Mm.
Do you see in any way that Wexford could still get out of Leinster, or how are you viewing it at the minute?
Well, sure. I tell you what it is, Paul. The way we'd be looking at it down in Wexford at this moment in time is we'd be disappointed with the result the other day, but we'd be very, very wary of what's coming down the line next Saturday evening against Offaly. Like it's not going to be plain sailing and that. And I'd say forget getting out of Leinster at the moment. Wexford people are looking to say, can we get back on track and stay out of the, I suppose, the relegation kind of a picture. Really, to be honest, if we could beat Offaly, that opens up the thing. Maybe depending on results, possibly we have a chance in the last game. But we'll only be focusing really in on Offaly this weekend, and you know, it's hard to see us having a place back in the Leinster Championship. To be honest with you, when you're getting beaten by Dublin and Galway, really, if you're looking at it at the start of the year, well, you're probably looking at it and saying it's between Wexford, Kilkenny, Galway, and Dublin to qualify, and that's generally the case in Leinster. And now we've been beaten by Galway and Dublin in both of our away games. So, to be honest, the hopes of us qualifying for the Leinster out of the Leinster Championship is fairly slim at this stage. But there's always hope. You'd never know. But we have to look after Offaly this weekend. Really, that's probably the focus down here more than anything. Offaly are coming down the tracks, and they'll fancy a cut off us as well. I think they're not going to be quaking in their boots with anything they've seen from us so far. And like I believe after the weekend as well, there's a few injuries in the Wexford camp, so that's not going to help things either. So it's very much try and get ready for Offaly this weekend and try and win that game and see where we go from there.
Yeah, even if you're looking at this weekend coming up, like you're obviously expect Galway to get a result against Antrim. Kilkenny Dublin is it could be an even enough one too with the way both teams are going there. But really for Wexford to qualify, they're gonna need the Cats to slip up.
Yeah, it's looking like that. I think somebody said to me today that Wexford needs Dublin to beat Kilkenny, and if we beat Offaly, then and we can beat Kilkenny, then we have a chance to qualify. I don't know whether that's the case or not. I haven't looked at it closely enough, but uh, it's slim, to be honest. Our chances of qualifying is very, very slim. Something dramatic is probably going to have to happen in the last two games. It's very much looking like it's going to be a Kilkenny and either Dublin or Galway Leinster final at this moment. To be honest, that's how I'd see it. Even though Dublin are going along quite nicely, I still think it'd be hard to see them go down to Nolan Park and beat Kilkenny. But you'd never know, they're going well. But you'd still put Kilkenny as favourites there. And that probably puts them into the Leinster final, and then it looks like to me kind of a Galway Dublin semi final as such in the last game in the group, and that'll be a big game down in Parnell Park, and then you'll probably get a really, really good view from Galway of where they are, to be honest. Going down there with a kind of a packed house, a kind of a good atmosphere in Parnell Park. I was there for the Wexford game, and it's a good kind of an atmosphere in it. And you'll see where Galway are after that game, really, to be honest, Paul.
I think one probably disappointment Galway will have from the weekend is the manner in which they conceded the two goals in the second half.
Yeah, sure. They kind of Wexford cut open their defence kind of in those scenarios. Really, there was probably Rory went down the middle for one of them, and when Rory gets ahead of steam, Rory O'Connor, when he gets ahead of steam like that, he can be very, very difficult to stop. And what you have to do there is kind of stop him at source. It's not about, you can't let him by you, because he goes by you, he's gone. But they probably will look back on the video tonight or this week and say, well, could we have stopped them at source? Could maybe a halfback got in quicker to help them or whatever? And when Wexford got a great goal that time, in the second goal, then not sure exactly what happened, but there was few runners maybe not tracked and things like that, and that's probably a little bit of maybe possibly inexperience from the half-back line, and they're probably not out and out defenders either, and it's something they need to bring into their game. Fahy and Gavin Lee, especially, are probably not, they've probably played more up the field rather than back the field in their career as players. So, it's probably something they need to develop. But, at the same time, there's something in it for the lads to work on from a management point of view. Obviously, they won't be happy to concede the goals, but still, it's nice to go back into the training field this week and have something to work on and be able to say to lads, well, we don't let that happen again.
The response was impressive after 2 goals, even when you consider Wexford got it back to 2 there during the second half. The goal, I didn't really panic after that.
No, not at all. Galway went back into their flow, and like to be honest, probably Wexford let them back into their flow too quickly. To be honest with you, they got scores very very easily after both goals. With nearly they got 2 points nearly straight away after both of them to kind of, it kind of cancelled out the goals very, very quickly. And the response, it was very much like as I thought in a lot of the game. Galway played really in their comfort zone. A lot of it, we never. Well, there was periods we probably tested them, but not for sustained enough periods to really put them under pressure. And maybe there was probably a small enough Wexford crowd up there, but to really get the Wexford crowd behind us, we needed to be really getting them in amongst them and maybe backing up a goal with a point or two straight after. And that didn't happen for us. We kind of let them get scores too easily afterwards. And from a Wexford perspective, I suppose, Paul, it was probably underestimated at the weekend, maybe on a national sense. But losing Shane Rick at the start of the game would have been a big loss for Wexford. He'd be our main man marker, and I'm sure he was probably the one who was assigned to pick up Cathal Mannion. Maybe he wouldn't have held him anyway, but Shane has a good record on players like that, on the likes of Tony Kelly and the likes of Owen Cody over the years, and they lost him kind of the last minute, and having to reshuffle the pack then just before throw in probably didn't help us. And Mannion, even though although he might have done that either ways, you would hope that Shane Wright would have had a better kind of grasp on him. It seemed to me, I wasn't at the game, I was only looking at it on TV, but it seemed to me from looking at it that the Wexford players were confused about who was to actually pick up Mannion. He seemed to be floating between the lines. He started in the inside line, ended up going to the half forward line at times, centre forward at other times, and there was a little bit of confusion in the backs of who is actually marking this fella, and that was something I'm sure that the lads tried to sort out at half time. But it's very very hard to change it once the horse is bolted. If you let Mannion into the game early on, his confidence is up, and it's hard to stop him then.
Do you think the biggest positive for Galway coming away from this one is to racking up 129?
Yeah, well, sure. It's a positive in that sense to get 129. Yeah, I'd say they'd probably be disappointed, Paul, with the lack of goal scoring opportunities they probably got. You'd probably want to be getting a few more kind of opportunities for goals. Anyway, the only real chance they had was when they got the goal. I think possibly there was one or two other half chances, but nothing from hugely from a goal scoring perspective. But to get 29 points is very impressive. They'll be happy with that. But as I said to you again, that 29 points, 17 of them comes from Mannion. Like,
Yeah.
so again, they'll be looking at that and saying, well, we need more from Tiernan and Killeen. As I said, Connor Whelan need to be getting on the scoreboard more. Colin Malloy, even though he's a new player, he's capable of more scores, and that sort of a thing. I think they'll be happy as well with their kind of impact from the bench as well. I thought Kevin Cooney, even though he wasn't on that long, going in for that ball for the goal, looked like a fella who wanted to make an impact. And Connor Cooney is still around there, and he's a player that can offer a lot from as well. So there's positives from Galway's point of view. They have the ship has steadied down a little bit now after the first game. They were disappointing in the first game. I'm sure you spoke about it there. They weren't up for the fight at all. They weren't ready for the game, and if you're not ready to play, you're going to get found out at this level. So they've steadied it down now with wins against Offaly and wins against Wexford, and I'm sure there's positive vibes coming out of the county. But I suppose the big challenges are to come. Really, they're not going to get too excited about it. Wexford are really a team in decline, really, Paul, and there's a transition going on. Like there's a lot of players after after departing the scene in Wexford, and the lads on the management team in Wexford are trying to blood new players, and probably a good few of them are not really ready yet, but they're probably the only options we have. And so, I wouldn't be getting too excited about maybe beating us at the weekend, but at the same time, it's positive from the point of view of going back into trend this week for Galway, that they've scored 129. They've only allowed Wexford to score 6 points from play, which is really, really positive. So there's a lot of positives from Galway's point of view, and they can use it to push forward now against Antrim next week, and for Galway hopefully against Dublin in the last game.
Just great though to see Kevin Cooney back on the pitch. Bro, I'm not sure if you remember him 2 years ago, that All Ireland semi final against Limerick. He really had a breakthrough season that year, and he's been impressive on the club front as well. Struggled last year with injury, just got himself back then. Had one or two kind of niggles at the start of this year to set him back, but looks to hopefully now be coming right at the right time.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if come the real part of the championship, if he's not starting for Galway. To be honest with you, I saw him even in Wexford Park this year in the league. He came on for in the second half in that game. Thought he was really impressive, very, very direct, very powerful, really, really good hurler. And sure, why wouldn't he be? He's coming from great stock, so he's going to offer a lot for Galway, and it's great to see him back. Again, you'd know his kind of individual situation more than I would, but I think he has an awful lot to offer Galway. As I said to you, I'd be very surprised if come the real part of the championship now in a few weeks' time, that he's not on the starting team for Galway, to be honest.
Where going now for you, Rory? Like, do you think Leinster is achievable for them to win this year? But where do you see them in the conversation at the minute?
Yeah, very much so. I would see Galway have a big chance still within the Leinster Championship. Like there's no doubt about it. There's huge quality in the Galway team. It's just, have they got the, I suppose, the bit of bite, the bit of cut in them to go to Parnell Park now and take down Dublin, which I'm sure they're more than capable of doing. I would probably put Galway, even though Dublin have had a great start to the championship and going well. I would probably expect Galway to beat Dublin, to be honest, looking at the quality of players they have. And then I'd be looking at Galway in a Leinster final. And really, to be honest with you, if Galway are going to go forward, they're going to have to step up in a Leinster final. Really, I think they haven't really gone at Kilkenny in a long time in a Leinster championship game. They're kind of, whether what it is, I don't know, but they're kind of showing Kilkenny too much respect, Paul. To be honest with you, I I just look at Galway, to be honest, and I think, as I said, I think they could take something from Wexford's attitude towards Kilkenny in lots of ways over the last 7 or 8 years, especially. That any time we play Kilkenny, we're kind of not the Wexford lads very much respect Kilkenny, but they're going at them. They're not standing waiting to see what Kilkenny are going to do. They're taking the game to them. They're bringing a physical presence in the back line against Kilkenny forwards. They're attacking them at every opportunity at the Kilkenny backs. And it's a long time since I've seen a Galway team really attack a Kilkenny team like that. Like I don't remember the last time that they've done it. To be honest with you, it could be going back a good while. That they've really, really attacked a Kilkenny team, and like there's most certainly talent in that Galway team. There's really, really good players, really good hurlers, really good athletes. Now, there's no reason why then that Galway couldn't be winning the championship this year, to be honest with you. But again, if you're going to beat Dublin, if you're going to beat Kilkenny, you're going to have to bring that fight. You're going to have to bring that 100% intensity from the very, very off and keep it going throughout.
It's just interesting this weekend too, Rory. Even Galway are coming up against Antrim this weekend. Antrim obviously haven't been in great form, it's safe to say so far. If you were Micheál Donoghue, do you mix up the team now this weekend? Like, even I was listening to Shane McGrath RD podcast, and he was saying that Galway should nearly make 10 or 11 changes for this game.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest with you. I think if I was Galway, I think if I was Galway, I'd still put out my team very much as strong as I could. To be honest with you, I think putting out 9 or 10 different players, you know, what's that going to achieve really? Like if those 9 or 10 players, yeah, it gives them an opportunity. But I think what Galway need to do is build form within the maybe established 19 or 20 players that they're going to be using, and get hopefully for them a victory against a good victory against Antrim this weekend that takes them in then towards a big game against Dublin the following weekend. I wouldn't mess around with it if I was them. I think to be honest with you, I'd leave it strong. And sure, if you have to take them off, then when the job is done after 45, 50 minutes, then job is done, and move on from there. But I'd still get a good 55 minutes into my main players, and keep them sharp, because you can't beat sharpness. Like again, it's another sport. But you look, I was just listening about Leinster rugby the other day, and they were talking about the Heineken Cup semi final that they lost, and they're kind of messing around with their teams in the weeks before it, and not playing their main players. And if you're not playing your main lads, they're lacking that bit of sharpness then as well. Like it's not, you can't just turn on form and turn it off and just take a rest for one week and come back the next week. If I was Galway, I'd keep building with what I have. Yes, if they want to look at a few one or two little tweaks, they could do that, but I wouldn't change much of the spine of my team, to be honest with you.
It's even to keep that consistency and momentum and even consistency within the team as well going, isn't it?
Exactly, that's what you need. Like Galway are a team, you know, in a sense, those Galway players there are still probably questioning where in their own heads they're probably questioning where are they in the grander scheme of the hurling game still. Are we contenders, or what are we? And like if I was with that Galway team, to be honest, I'd be looking at it and saying, well, we go out this week again against Antrim, go about our business, build our form again, maybe get a few more scores into the team, from the point of view of maybe Connor Whelan might get on the scoreboard, a little bit more, and really develop the thing that way. Like I wouldn't start Galway are not at a stage to be bringing on 7, 8 players. Like again, you'd know better than I do, but I don't know whether there's huge strength in depth in that Galway panel at the moment. To be bringing on that, and Antrim, even though Davy is talking like they'll have nobody at the weekend, they still will bring a certain challenge to it. I saw them down in Wexford Park, and they're not the worst team of all time or anything. They're athletic, they're fit, they're tuned in, they can hurl. So if you're half off your game, you could get stuck with a sticky one, and that's the last thing Galway need. Galway need to go about their business at the weekend. Arrive like they did to play Wexford, with a really good, positive first half performance, and hopefully from Galway's point of view, put Antrim away by the 50th or 55th minute, and then start to bring on a few and keep it fresh then for the following week.
It is the thing where it's so key as well, isn't it? Like Galway win at the weekend, they're qualified before you go to Penryn Park.
Exactly. So that takes all the pressure off. As I said, at the start of the year, obviously everyone wants to get to the Leinster final, but if you're not going to get to the Leinster final, the second best prize is to be in the top three. And Galway weren't there last year, so I wouldn't be messing about with it. I would just beat Antrim this weekend, and as you said, then you have a kind of a free shot at the semi final. Then really against Dublin, I call it a semi final in the last game, because that's essentially what it is. Whoever wins that is going to be in the Leinster final. So it's a huge game. I think this weekend for Galway, to back up this game, or the Wexford performance, and just get the job done.
As we mentioned there, Antrim obviously not going too well at the minute. Dave Fitzgerald saying they're going to have a few injuries carrying into this weekend. Do you see them having the off-league game in the back of their mind this weekend?
Yes, I probably would see them having the Offaly game in the back of their mind, but again, as I said, they're not just going to come to Galway and write off the game either. Every day is an opportunity to develop yourself. Every day is an opportunity to maybe grow. And I think Antrim, in the stage of the development that they're at under Davy, they're not just going to wave the white flag down to Galway and say, "Sure, we'll just go down for the jolly for the weekend." They're not training all year long to to arrive to Galway and not put up a performance. So I think Antrim probably are struggling for players with injuries, and they probably don't have huge strength and depth, but at the same time they're proud hurling people. And as I said to you, there is ability in their team. I saw them in Wexford Park. They weren't bad now, to be honest. They weren't that bad. There wasn't that much in it. And if you're kind of half off your game, they could surprise you. So from a Galway perspective, I'd just be saying to them, be on their toes and look after business.
Do you think it's a concern, Rory, the crowds this year in the Leinster Senior Hurling Championship?
Yeah, I think it probably is, Paul. But yeah, yeah, it's. I was probably disappointed with the crowd in Galway and Wexford the other day. Anyway, to be honest, I'd expected probably a bigger Galway crowd in it. Really, and it's probably a sign of maybe where Galway are at the moment as well. That maybe the Galway public are a little bit unsure of what this team are as well and who they are. But the Leinster crowds, I suppose, it has been disappointing. But you know, I'd be kind of half wondering, should the Leinster Championship look for a little tweak on their system, possibly. I'm sort of, again, I'd be thinking of mad ideas from time to time, but I just wonder, would there be anything in Leinster sort of maybe, you know uh, maybe adding a few teams into the Leinster Championship, and maybe having two groups or something like that, and then you get to maybe a more of a knockout stage later on in it to kind of really, then you'll really get the buzz of it, because I think there's not huge jeopardy for some of the teams like Kilkenny. Kilkenny are probably going to qualify most years in it. Galway are probably going to qualify most years, so it's kind of.
I definitely think that's a fair point because even if you're looking at it now and say Offaly were to get relegated, like
Mm.
for the development of their county team and their current team at the minute, like that's not developing the players. And Antrim have went between Joe Mack and Leinster. Obviously, they've survived the last few years, but even to bring on the counties below them too, like even we've seen Laois and Westmeath and these
Mm.
counties up here, and it's just been a yo-yo effect up and down most years.
Yeah, that's what I kind of feel like. I just think for the development of Leinster hurling, again, I know that the Joe McDonagh is a great competition. It probably suits it does suit those counties to be in it. But I'm looking at it and saying, well, Laois, Westmeath, Carlow, and even Kildare. There's four, there's four counties in Leinster that are doing good work for hurling. That are, they're hurling counties in a sense, and like, we have six teams in the Leinster Championship now. Why not try and get it into 10 and have two groups of five? And then you have some sort of a situation that you have a knockout system after that when you I don't know how you could set it up, but you could get some sort of a system that you get knockout games after that, and then maybe you'll get a bigger buzz into the Leinster Championship. I think there's something. I think, to be honest with you, Paul, the crowds in Leinster are always very dependent on whether Wexford are doing well or not. Like
Hmm.
Wexford generally bring the crowds when they're doing really, really well. I like, you look at Leinster finals over the years. If Wexford are in the Leinster final, there could be 50, 60,000 at it. If maybe if any of the other teams were in the Leinster final, you probably could play the games. You could probably play it in Tullamore or Portlaoise and pack it out, because there's probably 20, 25, 30,000 at the game. So Wexford maybe not having a really, really, really good team at the moment doesn't help the crowds in Leinster. It doesn't really help the buzz around it, because traditionally, as I said, Kilkenny probably don't bring huge crowds anyway until maybe later in the year. Offaly, Offaly are probably only getting back into position, and then, as I said, Galway are a little bit unsure of what they are, and probably as well the fact that Galway are so far away then as well, that it doesn't really transfer to having big crowds, because you know if a game is in Galway, it's a good spin from Galway to Wexford, like, so there's not a huge Wexford crowd going to go over there, and vice versa, there's not a huge Galway crowd going to come to Wexford Park. So I just think there's something you could look at in it. Maybe I'm completely out off the ball with it, but I sort of look at four Leinster teams there, and I'm saying, well, as you said, this year now, Offaly potentially could get relegated again. They could. If Antrim come and beat them, Offaly are probably going to be relegated on the head to head unless they beat Wexford now. So You know, that's something that you don't really want to see. You want Offaly to be pushing forward. You don't want Wexford either to be falling out of the that scene. And like we're closer and closer to that now. We're probably closer to that side of it than we are to winning the Leinster Championship at this moment in time. Probably people wouldn't realise that, but you know, if we were to lose a few more players off our team, we would be very much in that conversation. So you know, it's something that from a hurling perspective, they need to be aware of, and keep it going, because like if you lose Wexford or you lose Offaly, if you don't have Leash and Westmeath and Carlow and even Antrim going pretty well, now you've only a Leinster Championship with maybe two or three teams, and that's not what you want either, you know.
This is a concern because even if you look at that first game going Kilkenny, there's just over 8,000 people there.
Mm.
And the big concern now is like the Leinster final later in the year. It's in the Sunday slot this year. The Munster final is in the Saturday slot. It's going to be in Croke Park regardless. Like you really would hope that the crowd can rise significantly because like even if you go back to a few years when you had four teams go and the crowds were much bigger, like it definitely is a concern as we mentioned.
It is, but I think again maybe this is a little bit controversial, but I think the Leinster Council might need to start considering the fact that a Leinster final outside Croke Park could be the way to go. To be honest, with you,
Yeah.
to really bring a buzz and an razzmatazz to a game, you know, to have the crowd in there and it's absolutely packed to the rafters. That brings an awful lot to it. Like you look at the Munster Championship the other day, Clare and Tipperary. Like there's only 20,000 in Ennis, but it looks like it looks like the gladiators going into Coliseum, really. You know,
Yeah.
it's that type of an atmosphere. Whereas you go to Croke Park for the Leinster final, and as I said, with all due respects to all the other counties, but unless Wexford are in the Leinster final, you're not going to get a crowd probably above 30,000 in it. Now, why not put that 30,000, as I said, into Tullamore or put it into Nolan Park and really turn Nolan Park into as I said, the Thurles of Leinster. You know, Nolan Park is probably a really, really top class stadium. Why not pack that out with 30,000 people, have Kilkenny and Galway or Kilkenny and Dublin in there, and absolutely bring a carnival atmosphere to the thing. Like I think that'd bring an awful lot to the Leinster Championship. It'd be a pity to see in ways to see the Leinster final outside of Croke Park, but at the same time, if you were to bring as I said, a buzz to the thing like that, I think that brings an awful lot to it. To be honest with you, like again, it's probably me talking with my Wexford hat on, but I do really feel that unless Wexford are in the Leinster final, you won't get a crowd in Croke Park. Probably outside of 30,000. Now that's probably if Offaly come back again, maybe you'll get a crowd up again. But if you get Kilkenny and Galway or Kilkenny and Dublin or even Galway and Dublin in Croke Park, you're only going to get at best 30,000 at, and then it looks like it's empty, even though there's 30,000 at the game.
Yeah, that's a great point to be made. Unless there's something in the Dublin supporters maybe to come out for the Leinster final, but otherwise it is really hard to
It is.
see that beaten this year.
Mm.
Rory, we're talking about Leinster. Obviously,
Yeah.
a lot being made of Munster at the minute, a lot being made of the big two, Limerick and Cork.
Mm.
Can you see an All-Ireland winner coming from Leinster this year?
Uh, I think it's hard to see it, to be honest with you. I think it's hard to see an All Ireland winner. I think the closest will be Kilkenny. You know, they'll be the ones who probably look at it like I'm looking at it in this sense. Well, Kilkenny at the moment are probably at home training to win the All Ireland. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? They're getting ready to try and win the All Ireland. Even though Galway and Dublin would have ambitions to do that, I'm sure they're realistic and saying to themselves, "Well, it's probably not going to be our year. If we got to a semi final and we're competing strong in a semi final, they'd probably, you know, without saying it too loudly, they'd probably take that. You know what I mean? I think Kilkenny would probably fancy a go off any of the Munster teams, and I think the way they look at it is, you know, if you look at it last year, it probably should have had Clare beaten. You know what I mean? Really, and you know they let it slip, and Clare got into the final and won it. And Kilkenny will look at that from the point of view of saying, well, sure, we should be All Ireland champions. So they won't have any they won't have any fear of anybody in Munster. To be honest with you, I just wouldn't be so sure they have enough to really win it. But I'd be thinking it's myself. It's probably going to come between Cork and Limerick to win the All Ireland. I think, but Kilkenny will still take beaten when they'll still end up in the semi final. I think, and they'll take beaten at that point, and you'll have to be on the ball to take them because the Cats won't doubt themselves when it comes to it, and they'll bring the performance and bring the fight to it. So anybody who's going to beat them will have to be really on their toes. But to answer your question, I probably don't see a Leinster winner this year.
You were obviously the man, Rory, that stopped the Galway under 20s last year. When you come up with that plan in the Leinster semi final, they obviously Galway play Dublin Wednesday night this weekend in the Leinster under 20 semi final. Galway do look one of the form teams so far in this under 20 championship, but Dublin are coming with momentum as well after beating Offaly.
They are, yeah. Jesus, a year moves quickly, Paul. Probably a year to the day since we were playing up in Port in the semi final, and now we're I'm on the outside of it now again, looking at it. But no, I think Galway would be probably one of the favourites for the All Ireland Championship. Really, in the under 20 this year, I think they looked very impressive. I thought the night they played against Offaly, that game will do them the world of good because there was a serious atmosphere in that game, and it kind of prepares them for what's probably coming down the line. But Dublin won't be easily beaten either. I obviously know all of them players, and Dublin have serious players on that team now. The 4 or 5 of them who've a lot of inter-county senior experience at this stage, the likes of Brendan Kenny and Conal O'Reen and David Lucy and all those fellas. So those are serious players, and if Galway are kind of not on their toes, they'll get found out because probably nobody expected Dublin to go and beat Offaly probably if, last week, and I kind of had a sneaking feeling in my own mind that Dublin would do something in that game, knowing the caliber of players, knowing the athleticism in that Dublin group, and knowing the hurling ability they have as well. There's a lot of ability in that Dublin team, and the future is bright. But I still think Galway will be favourites going into the game. I think Galway will be probably on their toes from what happened to them last year against Dublin as well. We came out of the traps last year and got a few goals early on and really drove on the momentum from there. So Galway will be seeding from that, and they'll bring a lot of energy. But I think it'll be a close game. I think both of these two teams, to be honest with you, I'd probably put them down as favourites to win Leinster. Whoever wins this, I would fancy them to beat Kilkenny in the final, even though Kilkenny will be hard beaten. But I think this could be the pivotal game in the Leinster Championship.
Yeah, even if you're looking at it, just looking at from the weekend, Jason Rabbit. I was obviously on the 26th at the weekend. It's a real
Mm.
feeling for him still in leaving certain school and to be part of the Galway Senior Hurling panel. And then you're throwing Rory Burke, Aaron Nyland, Sean Murphy. They're obviously all on the Senior Hurling panel as well. And Killian Trayer's just struggling with injury at the minute. But like it is a huge advantage when you're having that many players from a 20 setup involved with a senior setup, I imagine.
Yeah, it can be an advantage, but at the other side of it, Paul, it sometimes can serve as a little bit of a distraction. Like it's not the easiest one to manage in the world now. I've had experience of it for 3 years, 2 years with Wexford 20s, and last year with Dublin, and like it's great to have fellas of that caliber to be in a senior panel, but at the same time, it can sometimes serve as a little bit of a distraction. And I probably saw that with Dublin early on this year. They had, as I said to you, they have 4 players there: David Lucy, David Purcell, Brendan Kenny, Conal O'Reen. They're 4 top class players, but they struggled early on in the year in the under 20s championship. Yeah, like they got beaten by Kilkenny in the first game. uh, Kilkenny got a few goals on them. Dublin hurled okay, but in the Wexford game, then they let Wexford beat them, and Wexford weren't that impressive this year, really, and that was a kind of a sign for me of a team that were still kind of trying to find their feet this year because of the fact that probably the senior players are away from the panel all the time and they're not working with the 20s. It takes that little period of time for them to settle back in again, and the last I know Galway haven't played for 4 or 5 weeks now in the Leinster Championship in the under 20s, and like what has happened in that period of time? Have those 4 or 5 players been training with the seniors, or have they been training with the under 20s? If they've been training with the under 20s, I'd put Galway as hot favourites for the game. If they've been kind of in and out with the seniors and the 20s, that can sometimes, as I said, kind of dilute the preparation of the under 20s team. And even though you're a senior caliber player, you still have to go back and perform and be ready to play for the 20s. And it's not as easy to do it when you're not in around that environment all the time. So it'll really factor for me where the real key factor in that is how much those players have been with the seniors. If they have they been with the seniors now and again, or are they with the seniors all the time? I don't know the answer to that, but I think if they've been with the 20s a lot, I think Galway will really benefit from that.
What do you think a Leinster title at 20s level could do for Go Ireland?
Well, sure, it's huge because a Leinster title. When is the last time Galway won it? Is it 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, really,
You
since
know,
since it's changed from 21s to 20s, the success hasn't really been there. Like,
yeah. Well, sure, I
because
know. It's
even Dublin bet them in a Leinster semi-final, I remember. Um,
about 2020. Is it 2020 or
yeah,
2021 around that time? Yeah.
yeah, and I remember Kilkenny bet them in one as well. Yeah,
Yes. Yes. So, while since Galway won it, and like they're a long ways from winning it at the moment, but like like the under 20 championship is a really really top class championship at this stage. Again, having been involved in it for a few years, I know the level of hurling that's in it and the level of preparation that goes into it, and really the teams are preparing, as well as nearly senior teams at this stage. So if you're winning titles at that age group, or you're in around titles at that age group, you're really operating at a high standard, and like a big prize in winning Leinster again. The big prize in it, I suppose, is you get straight to an All Ireland final from it. So the
yeah.
Leinster final, even though it's a Leinster title, it's an All Ireland semi final as well. So it's a really really big one to win. I suppose again, I'm always thinking of little tweaks and things like that, but I think it's a pity really in the Leinster championship or in the under 20 championship that maybe they don't look at a system where maybe the Leinster runners up and the Munster runners up would play in the semi final against the winners, to really really spice it up, because I think sometimes maybe the runners up in the championship might be maybe the second best team in the country. That could be in Munster or Leinster, and they're not getting a chance maybe in the final because of it. So I think that again that could be a little tweak. I don't know why it has to be over so quickly. They look to get some of these championships out of the way, really. Be only one more round. But I suppose, going back on your original question, Paul, winning a Leinster title like that for Galway would be big again. And Micheál Donoghue, I'm sure, will be looking for him to do it, because it provides players then for the senior team in the years to come. Like I saw Aaron Nyland last year up close and personal, and I think he's really really impressive. Really good player, as you said. Jason Rabbit, a good player. Young Burke there is a good player. All those fellas are good players for Galway, but to really rubber stamp that, it'd be nice for him to win a Leinster title and then go on maybe and win an All Ireland title. I know they were close. Fergal Healy is over the team, and he was close to winning a minor title. Did he win a minor title a few years ago as well?
No, they're beaten in that final by
Yeah,
Clare.
yeah, they were beaten by Clare, so I'm sure there'll be a hunger within him to kind of get over that block of winning the title as well. So I'm sure they've assembled an all-star management team, and if they can, I suppose if the players can listen to those fellas and get the right information from them, I think Galway will be in a good place in the next few years.
Yeah, that's the under 20s. They're playing Dublin Leinster semi-final Wednesday evening in Tullamore, and then it's Galway Antrim Saturday at 2:30 live on GA Plus as well. That's all we do have time for on this evening's show. Thanks a million to Rory for coming on to this week's podcast.